What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content that I'm uploading onto my channel, then feel free to subscribe, and you can also offer suggestions on topics and characters and storylines and whatnot that we can have discussions on later on in this channel.
So I'm recording this before I've even uploaded Captain America Sam Wilson for Civil War II, and I have no idea how divisive that video is going to be. It's going to be one of those that either you love it or you hate it. And it is, I'm almost terrified to read the comments because people have a tendency to think emotionally instead of rationally when it comes to, like, you know, deep-seated feelings. And so because of that, I'm curious to see what direction the comment section takes. But the idea here is that seems, or at least that story seems to be as politically charged as Nick Spencer gets. Now, a lot of it may just be because Nick Spencer was pissed about having to do Civil War II and maybe decided to kind of torpedo Civil War II to a degree. I'm not really sure. But what this does, or at least what Marvel Now 2.0 with regards to Sam Wilson Take Back the Shield does, is it kind of gives us about 4 one-shots and then it rolls into the volume, the official volume of Take Back the Shield. At least as far as I can tell, that seems to be the case. Of course, we have one issue that focuses on Misty Knight, another that focuses on Rage, I think it is. We have one that focuses on Demolition Man, but this one really focuses on how Steve Rogers is working behind the scenes to basically make life hell for Sam Wilson. And it's kind of crazy here, because remember, for those of you guys who are just now joining us with regards to Marvel Now 2.0, one of the big changes that was made to Steve Rogers was that where prior to the events of Secret Wars, he had lost his super soldier serum, he was aged to the point that he basically just kind of became the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. And then going into all new, all different Marvel, a lot of those standards were maintained. During the events of Avengers Standoff, when the Cosmic Cube was basically restored to the Marvel landscape, the Red Skull used the Cosmic Cube to return Captain America back to his youth, but then also change his history. So that instead of being, you know, a super soldier that fought on behalf of America, the Red Skull altered reality so that his history was now the fact that he was basically a Hydra agent. And that's how Nick Spencer really rolled the whole Hydra story into Captain America, and it was cool. It was super cool. Like that, I can never get past that moment where he just says, "Hail Hydra." It was so awesome to see. But the Sam Wilson stories really take Captain America from the other direction, in the sense that where Steve Rogers was very, you know, focused on saving the world, the leader of the Earth's mightiest Avengers, Sam Wilson is very grounded in terms of how he conducts himself as Captain America. He focuses on a lot of the small things. Now, what this has done is draw the ire of a lot of very powerful people, because the ground level superhero antics were usually left to, like, Spider-Man. They were left to Daredevil, to the Punisher. The Punisher was usually the guy that took out, you know, corrupt politicians. Sam Wilson focusing on a lot of these ground level issues like governmental corruption means that these things are being brought into the light more so than they ever were before. And so Sam Wilson has basically kind of become this thorn in the side of the corrupt politicians and corrupt members of corporations and so on. But one of the guys who was most outspoken was a guy by the name of Tom Harrell. Now, keep in mind, during Civil War II, Tom Harrell was a senator from Texas. They had basically moved in the direction of pushing the AmeriCops. So to say, you know, these cops that were very totalitarian in nature, there were a lot of issues of them profiling, so on and so forth. But what happens here is while he's in the middle of a speech talking to campaign donors, the entire thing's interrupted by the arrival of Ultimatum and Flag Smasher. Now, this again is Nick Spencer drawing on the Mark Gruenwald era of Captain America, which I don't know if you guys noticed, but Gruenwald had a huge contributing hand to the Captain America mythos, because some of the most notable members of his rogues gallery came out of his run, you know, came out of Gruenwald's run. And so again, this really seems to be Nick Spencer, you know, kind of paying homage, which is actually good to see, because I think that in a lot of instances, writers are so keen on, you know, making their own take on a character that not a lot of praise is given to contributions of previous writers. And so it's really cool to see that you know, things are going in this direction. But again, Sam Wilson's still also struggling with this whole idea of whether or not he's accepted, so on and so forth. But of course, you know, him being here comes at the behest of Sharon Carter, who has, you know, summoned him on behalf of S.H.I.E.L.D., as well as Steve Rogers and Rick Jones. Now again, Rick Jones is not really A-bomb in All New, All Different Marvel. Instead, he initially showed up as a guy who was just operating behind the scenes, the Whisperer, who was more or less like this Marvel allegory to WikiLeaks. He was basically going through, he was, you know, making these huge information dumps. That's how the world learned that S.H.I.E.L.D. was basically creating cosmic cubes in the first place. You know, but the idea is that Rick Jones was essentially saved from his sentence by Sam Wilson, and he basically kind of operates behind the scene as a member of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's this idea that as long as Rick Jones does what he's told to do, his sentence will basically be commuted. But again, we also have the arrival of Steve Rogers. Now, with regards to Sam Wilson being here, it's just another instance that everybody hates him. You know, the general public here in the story, that as Nick Spencer writes it, is essentially a reflection of the naysayers from Sam Wilson's character that are like, no, we want Steve Rogers, we don't want Sam Wilson. And so when Steve Rogers shows up, people are like, yeah, it's Steve Rogers, this is amazing, this is awesome. Now, of course, once Steve and Sam actually get into the room where all the campaign donors and where Tom Harrell is being kept, Flag Smasher actually creates a really interesting scenario. And I'm curious, I want a response from you all on this one. I want to know what your all's thought is here. Flag Smasher has historically been this B or C list level character. He was always a minor villain that would just pop up from time to time, and he would fight people, but he was an anarchist. He was a guy that alongside Ultimatum, the goal was to basically just bring the governments of the world toppling down and just let anarchy reign supreme. Now, the irony of all this is that people inherently flock to security. Like a multitude of people, really most people, flock towards the idea of security. They want to know that what's here today is going to be here tomorrow. It's human nature. It's not a byproduct of like the modern age. It's just always been that way. That's why ever since there's been more than 5 people in a room, somebody was in charge, because people always want to know that when it really hits the fan, that somebody will be able to guide them towards a safer direction. The reason why I say this is so ironic is because let's say that like the country were to enter a state of anarchy where the government came crashing down, all you would have is a rise of petty strongmen. You would have, strongmen, you would have people who were warlords, and people would flock to them. They would sacrifice some measure of freedom for their own security. It's just kind of how people are. But the idea here is a flag smasher basically says we're all fighting for the same cause here. We're fighting for the same thing. I want anarchy. I want these corrupt politicians to come crashing down. I want these corrupt businesses to come crashing down. You basically want the same thing. Now, the difference here, of course, is a flag smasher wants to take it a step further. But the question he proposes here is really interesting. And this is why I say, I want to know what your all stance is on this. What flag smasher basically does is he offers the scenario, if you could take out a person who had made your life hell, would you do it? Now, the reason why he proposes this is to really kind of get at Sam Wilson, but he's talking about Tom Harreld. He's like, look, Tom Harreld is one of the most outspoken people when it comes to the idea that Sam Wilson is not Captain America. Well, he hasn't served in the military. He's not a real American because he doesn't have the same kind of values that Steve Rogers has. He doesn't share our views, that kind of thing. If Sam Wilson could do it, would he kill Tom Harreld? And that's a question that I'm posing to you guys. If there was someone out there who was just making your life absolute hell, who was questioning you at every turn, every step of the way, they were constantly haunting your footsteps. They were there to say, hey, no, don't do that, do this. You're not really, you're not great, you're not, yada, yada, yada. Would you take them out? And if you would, then where does the line drawing stop? At what point do you get rid of the guy? Like, at what point do you transition from getting rid of the guy that's making your life hell to getting rid of the guy who's just kind of outspoken? It creates some really weird dichotomies here, and it really kind of, gives us this scenario where things just progressively fall downhill. But even then, what Flag Smasher is proposing, the idea of anarchy, isn't necessarily that bad. Now, I don't mean to say that anarchy in and of itself is inherently good in the sense that, lawlessness is the way to go. I mean, it would create absolute pandemonium, but what it does is it basically creates a circumstance where people can start over. It gives people the chance to really give society the chance to do things all over again. It also removes the idea of anonymity, and it introduces accountability. For example, there was a really good episode called Hated in the Nation from the show Black Mirror. I don't know how many of you guys are watching that, but it's like a modern day Twilight Zone. But the idea was that there was this campaign on social media. It was basically Twitter, and it was people who were like, this person needs to die and that person needs to die. And it was kind of this system where individuals would go out there and they would voice their own opinions, but they would remain anonymous. And so the concept or the gist of the episode was that there was essentially this huge outbreak, I don't know, these technologically advanced bees or something like that, but they were basically assigned to track down not the individuals who were going to be killed, but the individuals who were using anonymity to say who should be killed. And so, anarchy in and of itself creates this kind of fresh moment, this restart, where it presses this huge button and says, now there is no more invisibility. Now everybody is held accountable, and people basically get to kind of start from there. The irony of all this, the way that Nick Spencer is drawing it, is that Flag Smasher himself is relying on anonymity in the sense that we basically have him saying there are bombs that are placed all around the country in different locations. And these locations are not, highly populated areas. They're structural areas. They're designed for the purpose of taking individual things down. Now, this is really Nick Spencer kind of drawing on the Fight Club concept in the sense that with regards to Fight Club, the grand plan of detonating these bombs was to basically take out the entire credit system so that everybody started at zero. It really seems to be the same instance here in the sense that Flag Smasher is saying, look, the first step to introducing an anarchist state is to remove all methods of profiling, to basically eliminate the standards that people use to differentiate themselves from other people, to say, I am better than that person because. And so what he does is he says the first thing we're going to take out is the no-fly list because it's designed to profile people and decide who can and cannot fly. The danger of all this is that there are people on that list that should not, that should be on there, that are dangerous people. And so again, it's really Flag Smasher kind of, starting to fail to see the point. And while Rick Jones tries to go through and basically prevent each of these bombs from detonating, and he's largely successful, in the end, we also have an actual bomb that's been planted there by Flag Smasher in the location of Steve Rogers, Sam Wilson, that it does detonate. And it really just kind of descends spins into conflict here. Now, under normal circumstances, I would just say, this is unnecessary, this doesn't matter, it's really pointless, but in fact, it's anything but pointless. This is wildly important, and the reason why is because of how Sam Wilson's moving, how Steve Rogers is fighting, the fact that they're basically, you know, they're teaming up and they're working together. But I want you to keep this moment in the back of your head, because at the end of this comic, Nick Spencer is gonna drop a bombshell, which is gonna be, it's gonna be crazy. But essentially all these bombs that have been activated, or at least that are set to go off by Flag Smasher, that basically decrypt the launch codes for nuclear missiles, these data bombs, or these really, you know, virus bombs, as you want to call them, that decrypt launch codes, kind of send them out there to the world so anybody can set them off if they want to. You know, the idea is that these are all essentially stopped. And so in a panic, Flag Smasher says, okay, fine, if the bomb that was tied to Senator Tom Harreld is not going to detonate, then I'll just shoot him. Now, of course, Steve Rogers says, hey, Sam Wilson, take care of that. Sam Wilson throws the shield, and he misses. He misses Flag Smasher, and Flag Smasher shoots Senator Tom Harreld. Now, the reason why I say this is so cool is because this is really Sam Wilson looking around and saying, well, things are just gonna get worse now, because not only do people look at him and say, you're just not even Captain America. Like, sure, you're a hero, sure, you got the shield, but you're not really Captain America. Now they can pin failure on his chest. They can say, you got a senator killed because you're not Captain America. See, you're not Steve Rogers. Steve Rogers would have hit Flag Smasher. Steve Rogers would have knocked that gun out of his hand, but you're not Steve Rogers. Now, what we do from here is we transition to a Hydra base with Steve Rogers meeting up with Dr. Eric Selvig, because keep in mind, Dr. Eric Selvig is kind of his man behind the scenes, but Selvig, we would normally kind of dismiss as like, well, he's just a guy that's here. The way that Nick Spencer really draws him out, and again, I have this discussion in my Captain America Steve Rogers video, but the way that Nick Spencer describes him is that Selvig is crucial. Selvig's probably better than almost anybody else out there in the Marvel Universe, because he's the one that figured out that Ulysses' powers are not 100% perfect. The Inhuman who said he could see the future during the events of Civil War, that sometimes he's wrong, he's seeing alternate realities. He's the one that was kind of giving Captain America, or giving Steve Rogers, the information he needed to basically work against the superhero community. But when Selvig says, how is it that, you know, why is it that Sam Wilson missed? Steve Rogers basically says, I know that shield. I've been using it for half a lifetime. I know exactly how to stand and hit my target. Sam Wilson doesn't. And so what had happened was, when they were fighting, Steve Rogers was basically kind of maneuvering Sam Wilson in a position so that he knew when Sam Wilson threw the shield that he would miss. Steve Rogers made sure that Sam Wilson missed Flag Smasher and Tom Harreld was killed. Not only that, that's not Flag Smasher. That's a life model decoy that was sent out by Steve Rogers. Steve Rogers is responsible for all of this. And the reason why he engineered it is because Tom Harreld was basically a loose end. Remember, Tom Harreld, Harry Hauser, and Paul Kane were the ones who were present during the events of Sam Wilson's Civil War II, when U.S. agent John Walker was brought in by Steve Rogers to go out and fight Sam Wilson and to basically take his shield away. And so what Steve Rogers says is, this is going to make things even harder for Sam Wilson. Not only that, again, keep in mind, because Steve Rogers is a Hydra agent, he knows that trying to take on the United States as a unified country will never work. The best way to do it is to basically create rifts in the country, to create racial rifts, political rifts, things that will force people or drive people to be in a situation where they will say, that person's not like me because, and I don't want to have anything to do with him, to basically create these differences. And so a country divided makes it easier for Steve Rogers to more or less implement his plan and eventually conquer the United States. So again, this is why I say Nick Spencer's run is so good. The political stuff gets really preachy, and it does kind of get a little annoying after a while. It does create a really strong story for Sam Wilson, but in all honesty, I'm really interested in like what Steve Rogers is doing behind the scenes. That's why I love Captain America Steve Rogers so much. It's some of the best storytelling with Steve Rogers' character really since like Ed Brubaker. You know, Ed Brubaker's Volume 5 when Bucky Barnes came back and all that kind of stuff. But Steve Rogers as a Hydra agent, I think, is one of the greatest things to ever happen to his character, because it creates some incredible storytelling. But in any event, if you guys are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.